Hello everyone and welcome to the Michisok channel. Today's video is going to be slightly off topic from my phasmophobia videos, but as many of you won't know, right, I'm actually a dinosaur based YouTuber. I started off doing videos on dinosaurs and slowly sort of turned to different games. So you can see this video as a slight return to that. So as you can tell from the title, right, I'm going to be covering herds in this video, which to me is a very important topic, right? When it comes to dinosaurs, a lot of people think, oh my god, it's got teeth, it must be so cool. But I actually like thinking about how they travelled, sort of, did they stick in herds? What was it like? What made up a herd? How many juveniles? How many, like, young adults? How many actual adults? Stuff like that. How was each treated? It's very important to understanding the mindset of a dinosaur. Of course, much of this is going to be pure speculation on my part. I'm not a paleontologist, I'm not a biologist, but as far as I can tell, I'm not going to be making any, like, accusations about dinosaurs. I'm not going to be saying, like, hey, Maiasaura, that can fly, surely. I mean, it's got a big head, surely it can, like, balloon up or something. I'm not going to be doing anything like that. Everything I say is going to be based in even the slightest sliver of evidence, right? And I'll put all the evidence in the description and the comments. So I've already determined that this video is going to start and end in a starting chapter and an end chapter, and there's going to be two middle ones, right? So it keeps it simple. So the first chapter, as far as I can tell currently, is going to cover, herds in the modern age. What are they used for? Stuff like wildebeest. How do they react to predators? How do they fight them off? It's quite a big one as well. And how does a predator see a herd? It's also going to cover what tactics are used to fight off predators, and how the young sort of juveniles are treated. The second one, the second chapter will detail the dinosaurs that I believe would have used herd tactics. So currently I'm thinking hadrosaurs, but I wrote this before I actually researched it, so I can say that hadrosaurs did in fact use it, and so did ceratopsians, but I'm not going to be covering ceratopsians in this video. I think it's a big enough topic for a separate one. So the third chapter is going to detail how herds were built. I don't mean like Minecraft style, place a block, oh my god it's a herd. I mean like how many juveniles, how many adults, how many babies, did they nest, stuff like that, right? Because I think it's often overlooked when we look at dinosaurs, whether the old stayed with the young or whether the young stayed together. It's a very confusing thing, but I feel like I'll explain it thoroughly. I'm going to be using to detail my thoughts on how herds would have worked in, well, dinosaur times, so late Jurassic, Cretaceous, that sort of time period. And I mean, you shouldn't take any of that literally, right? But it's going to be my thoughts, and I think they're based in quite a bit of evidence, so it's worth watching. A common example of herding behaviour in the modern age is a wildebeest, and that sounds really obvious now I'm reading it out loud, but they have an instinct that tells them they need to group together. I'm pretty sure it's something based in like being social as well, so quite a human behaviour, trying to be social. But it also leads to stuff like the defense of the majority of the animals, which I think is really cool. So you might think that all the prey items gathering together for a predator, that's going to be like a buffet, surely. But I think people underestimate strength in numbers, right? And the strength of the prey that most predators go after. Because these aren't like, it's not like picking up food, they've got to hunt for it, right? There's a lot more strength in numbers than you're expecting. Okay, so this next bit I actually had to fully write down because I don't really know a way to remember all this, but you're gonna have to stick with me, right? So I want you to imagine that you're a carnivore hunting a lone wildebeest. In this scenario, you of course have many options to choose between. You could gather your group, for example, to encircle and wear away at the target, which honestly, I think is quite a good option. If you can tire it out and then go after it, absolutely perfect. All of your pack doesn't need to engage at once. You can just make it tired and then go after it. Easy meal, surely. Right? You could also, if size and environment permits you, ambush the animal. One which would spend a large part of its day foraging and so lacking focus in the world around it. So an animal that's going to be eating constantly, right? Not got its head up, not looking for predators all the time. It's going to have trouble spotting you, right? And that's going to allow you to get close, and probably close enough that the animal can't react in time to stop you. Such a lack of focus would mean an opportunity to target vital organs and get away whilst confusion overwhelms the animal. Now, the adrenaline from this action could wear away at the alertness of the animal as it fades, right? Because you tend to feel like quite tired after the adrenaline fades. Whilst blood loss from the former injuries could cause tiredness and weakness you could use to exploit the target. Right, so like I said, if you can tire it out at all, or if you can like cause it to become sick, I think people underestimate the stamina effect of being in a hunt, right? Even for like the target that's defending, right? It's costing a lot of energy to stand and like fight against you. So given enough time, your victim could also fall victim to disease and infections from, the wounds you inflicted from the ambush, which is what makes ambushers highly effective, in my opinion. And funny thing is, that's actually really similar to the monitor lizard. That's not in the script, but I thought it was nice enough to like tell you. So what I'm trying to say here is that you have options with a single animal, right? The ability to have a lone target, one that could be predicted and focused down, is an advantage any predator would want. Right, we're talking lion, cheetah, jaguar, they'd all want this sort of scenario. Of course, you could still be hurt from such a hunt, but the likelihood of such an event would be much lower from a single target compared to a group. I'm sorry that I'm reading from a script, but it's got to happen. There's no way I'm memorising all this to get it released today or tomorrow. Probably tomorrow, though. Okay, so now I want you to imagine the same scenario, but with a group of wildebeest, right? Possibly 60 strong according to Google. I think they're gathering groups that big. So here your options are much more limited than with a lone target. Many animals within the herd would be acting as lookouts, similar to how meerkats act when they're looking for eagles, right? So the foraging members are going to be protected by the lookouts, and they're going to trade every so often. And though your ambush worked well on a single target, it has a much higher chance to be spotted by lookouts, who will call out and alert the members that are foraging. Suddenly your ambush has turned into running away and trying to get hidden again. So how about encircling the target like before, right? Well, with there being so many possible victims, you've got to narrow it down quite a lot, right? The herd scale ensures that even the weaker members are surrounded by healthier animals and so defended. It's also important to note that they would be much trickier to spot amongst such a large group of animals. Unless you're like watching certain animals very closely, you're not likely to find the weakest one. So if you were to try and encircle a member of your choosing, you'd need to separate it from the group, which is much trickier than you might consider due to the herd's instinct to either run in a stampede or stand their ground together and fight, which is definitely not something you want if you're hunting it. If you engage in a chase following the stampede, you risk getting crushed by the animals or getting an injury whilst trying to tackle one. Even an injury such as a minor broken leg would leave a predator destined for starvation, and so such a move against such a large group of targets is very risky. If a herd stood its ground, you might be in a highly negative situation also. This is due to the members guarding each other, and so stopping an easy hunt from the flank. Whether the animals have horns or not doesn't really matter in this scenario. Animals of such weight could break bones or damage your organs, which really leaves you easy pickings for other predators or starvation. Even if you try and go for the weaker members in such a formation, such as the calves, I think it's calves. One sec, I need to check. Calves. Am I using the right one? Calves. Calves. Which one? Which one is it? A calf, right? With an F. Perfect, right? So, where was I in the thing? Yeah, even if you try and go for the formation, for weaker members in the formation, such as a calf, right? They're likely to be inside the group of adults, and this means you would both have to break through the formation and single out a young member whilst avoiding the animals around you. It's practically impossible, right? You're surrounded as soon as you go in. I hope this explains why a herd would be much safer for the members and much more difficult for any aggressors to crack compared to fighting a lone victim. As far as I can tell, herd behaviour is shown to be present in animals such as ceratopsians, which of course includes the Triceratops, and the much lesser known Avaceratops and Protoceratops. Seriously, I don't know why you guys don't know those. Mind you, if you're a dinosaur guy, you probably do, because you're watching this, right? You could also say that hadrosaurs, which is what I'm focusing on, did the exact same. So the hadrosaur group contains animals such as Maiasaura and the Shantungosaurus, which is much larger. As we focus on the hadrosaur group today, I'll forego many mentions of the prior mentioned ceratopsians in order to save time and focus upon a single area. A study linked below from 2014 and by the Geological Society of America seems to suggest that hadrosaurs did indeed live in herds, though the evidence of their behaviour leaves much to desire. I've got to be honest, you can't get much from tracks and bones. So, like, we talk to each other very actively, we interact with each other a lot, right? But if someone was just looking at our bones, they wouldn't really be able to tell any of that. So we've just sort of got to guess. If they're close together, all the bones and stuff like eggs and nests, you can make an educated guess about how they acted. So here I'm quoting the study directly, right? It might be a bit awkward, I think my voice is going. Okay. Well-preserved hadrosaurid tracks, most of which contain skin impressions, demonstrate that the herd contained adults, subadults, juveniles, and very young individuals. This track site assemblage represents the first definitive evidence that hadrosaurids lived in multi-generational herds, which is perfect because this is a video on herds. If this doesn't have evidence, then I couldn't make the video, right? A behavioural pattern not recognised previously from either bone beds or other track assemblages. And this of course goes to say that animals lived close to each other, and for further backing, this is not only proof of such behaviours documented. Not the only proof of such documents. I'm not redoing this, alright? So another source is a study conducted in 2018. So this study is present on nature.com. Again, I'll try and link it below, but I don't think I left a link for this one, so good luck with it. And it states, we report details of a unique association of hadrosaur and therizinosaur tracks found in the late Cretaceous Lower Cantwell Formation, which is actually quite important, right? It also states that it is notable that the co-occurrence of Therizinosaurus and hadrosaurids is so far limited to this single locality in the Lower Cantwell Formation, and this association is not documented elsewhere in North America. So this seems to suggest that alongside the herding of same species animals, that different species could have come together and tried and support to each other. Britannica, which is another online page, supports the idea of herds and Maiasaura. Maiasaura herding, I guess you could say, and other hadrosaurs by stating the remains of adult Maiasaura were found in close association with a nest of juvenile dinosaurs, each about 1 metre, 3 feet long, suggesting perhaps that younger members were cared for and not abandoned to survive alone, but integrated into the group and protected by the bigger members. It also states how hundreds of skeletons preserved in one specific ash bed in Montana, as well as those preserved in nesting sites, suggest that Maiasaura was migratory. Such evidence also demonstrates that these dinosaurs were social animals that nested in groups, right? And that's another quote, I believe. From which we can infer that the dinosaurs actually had a tendency to, get together outside of nesting periods, which is very interesting because it does support the idea that they formed herds. As I have mentioned while describing the dinosaurs that could have exhibited herd behaviour, and so travelled in groups, it is possible that the herd was made up of all sorts of ages, right? So not just young and young, you could get old, young, juveniles all in a single herd. Britannica mentions how the bones of discovered embryos were not fully ossified, I think that's how you pronounce it, stating that it means the young could not have walked immediately upon hatching and would have required some degree of parental care, which suggests that the animals actually cared for each other, which would actually make it likely that they'd stay together. Right? It's possible that this was just a maternal thing. Animals, when we have kids, want to protect the kids for a couple of months. But it's also possible that they just sort of integrated into the larger group and cared for each other by defence and eating together, acting as lookouts. So yeah, this could show us that even if temporary, adult members of the hadrosaur group would have supported younger members, which hints at the protective instinct that wildebeest and other animals have towards those in the herd, which is very important for this. To quote a study I have already once quoted again, my voice is going, I can't keep doing this, man. Well-preserved hadrosaurid tracks, right, most of which contain skin impressions, demonstrate that the herd contained adults, subadults, juveniles, and very young individuals. This track site assemblage represents the first definitive evidence that hadrosaurids lived in multi-generational herds. A behavioural pattern not recognised previously from either bone beds or other track assemblages. Track length-width ratios independently support a hypothesised growth curve, suggesting that young hadrosaurids had a brief period of rapid growth. So they went through a massive growth spurt, is what it's trying to say. This of course supports the idea of herd behaviour in the dinosaurs, and seems to show us that the larger members of the herd protected the young during their vulnerable growing phase. This growing phase, according to the study, seems to suggest that animals would grow rapidly at a point in their lives, which would ensure that herd protection would only have to occur for a short duration of a dinosaur's life. Despite this, it still supports the idea that they were travelling alongside adult members as young members in a herd. Now this bit is my pure speculation of how the herd would have supported dinosaurs' survival, especially that of the younger members. Presence of many members, such as part of a herd, at a nesting site would ensure that the eggs are protected from carnivores and pterosaurs wishing to consume them. I also theorise that the herds of these animals would be largely defensive, similar to modern day counterparts. Because animals tend to act very similar. Of course, we're talking like 60 million year difference, but if something works, it tends to be used. You may assume that a large carnivore such as Daspletosaurus would have no issue with such groups, especially considering the Maiasaura only weighed about 4 tons, 3 to 4 tons I believe it said, compared to the Daspletosaurus and its 3+ tons. To me, however, it's possible that Maiasaura could have caused injury that the Daspletosaurus couldn't have recovered easily from, right? Whether this is getting hit in the ribs during a stampede or knocked to the floor in a similar situation, right? It is also easy to see how a 4-ton behemoth could break bones, right, and probably kill you. We're talking about major blunt force injury, right? You just don't walk away from that. To me, it also seems probable that in order to avoid larger carnivores like T-Rex, the herd would have had lookouts, like warning the group to flee if the predator was heard or seen. This would have allowed the survival of many of the members of the herd, given they were fit enough, and allowing for the survival of the fittest. And this is because the predator would not be able to run down the fleeing herbivores at a distance. The Maiasaura had a supposed speed of 28 miles an hour, which would be able to outpace the predators such as T-Rex 10 to 25 miles per hour, though stamina and such would definitely come into play. Well, there we go, 90% of the video was just me reading off of the script, right, which I'm still doing, but you can't tell, can you? No, I'm only joking and winging this bit, right, but I mean, I really hope you enjoyed, because this video took like 3 hours, 2-3 hours, yeah, in fact, 3 hours-ish, and I've not actually edited the video together yet. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to hopefully make some more of these and get better at every one, and I'll see you in the next video. Hope you learned something, and goodbye.